Welcome back, you guys. Your boy CK, and it's that time of the year where, there's not really much to talk about, so I feel like complaining. Let's talk about the guys who did not get elite cards in Madden 18 Ultimate Team that deserve to. Starting with Tennessee Titans quarterback Marcus Mariota. I did an entire video on why I think this guy and the Tennessee Titans will have an amazing season and why they're my biggest sleeper team in the AFC. So it shocked me that when Madden 18 ratings came out, he was not an elite card. He had way more yards than Ryan Tannehill, 7 more touchdowns, and 3 less interceptions with a better QBR. But Tannehill gets an elite and Mariota doesn't, man. It just does not make sense. Next up, we have a former Philadelphia Eagle, and trust me, that's not the reason why he's on this list. No, it's because of what he actually did on the field for the Miami Dolphins. Over 115 tackles, 2 interceptions, a touchdown, all of which is way more than Shane Ray, who had only 48 tackles, 0 interceptions, 0 touchdowns, but somehow got an elite. Now I understand Shane Ray had 8 sacks, but you gotta tell us the criteria because there are other linebackers who had no sacks but had some interceptions who also got elites. Like, what are you basing this on? Kiko definitely deserves to be an elite, man, especially when elites are 80 overall and above. Next up, we have a 2-for-1 special, man. CJ Fedorowicz and Jack Doyle, both tight ends who I felt deserved elites, especially if you have guys like Zach Miller getting elites. Fedorowicz had more receptions than Zach Miller, more receiving yards than Zach Miller, and the same amount of touchdowns. So what other criteria do you go by when giving tight ends elite cards? I really don't understand. But Jack Doyle's situation is even worse. He had more receptions than Zach Miller, more receiving yards than Zach Miller, and also more touchdowns. So every single category you can possibly base this on, he beats him. If you're gonna give Zach Miller elite, you have to give Jack Doyle and CJ Fedorowicz elites, especially when the threshold is only 80 overall and above. Now, to avoid being called biased, I'm gonna leave this stat up on the screen, man. 225 catches, 2,500 yards, 19 touchdowns in the first 3 seasons. We have Randy Moss, okay, really good wide receiver. Larry Fitzgerald, Hall of Famer. AJ Green, top 5 wide receiver. DeAndre Hopkins, top 5, if not top 10. Odell Beckham Jr., top 5 wide receiver at least. Mike Evans, he's approaching top 5 wide receiver category. And then Jordan Matthews. How does Jordan Matthews not have an elite if he's in the same category as those guys I just named?
That nigga's tripping.
Now, if you're saying, oh, CK, he didn't have the best season last year, okay, I understand that he only had 3 touchdowns, but then how does Adrian Peterson get one? If we're going by last year, Adrian Peterson only has 72 rushing yards. But if we're going by their entire career, Jordan Matthews clearly deserves to at least be an 80 overall. Like, are you serious, EA? You really just disrespected my mans like that. Like, I have his jersey. Don't do that again. Next up, we're talking about Jamal Charles. This is pretty much tying into my Adrian Peterson point. If Adrian Peterson got one for career achievements, then Jamal Charles deserves one too, man. He's been a perennial elite card in Madden. I mean, if you're gonna give Adrian Peterson one, you gotta give Jamal Charles one. Next up, we're talking about Star Lotulelei. I think I said it right about time, but yeah, he had more sacks than Benny Logan, a guy who I liked. He was on the Eagles, but if you're gonna give him an elite card for just being a great run stuffer, you gotta give someone like Star Lotulelei an elite card as well, man. Of all the ones I've done so far, this one might piss me off the most. I like Jeremy Maclin. He played for the Eagles, always gonna have a place in my heart just because of how, well-spoken he was. He wasn't a diva, like past wide receivers we had.
It's my quarterback.
But he only had 536 receiving yards last year, 44 receptions, and only 2 touchdowns. Yet somehow he got an 81 overall elite. Meanwhile, Kenny Stills had 42 receptions, 726 receiving yards, and 9 touchdowns. That's over 4 times as many touchdowns than Jeremy Maclin, and somehow he didn't get an elite. Next up, we're looking at George Iloka, one of my favorite free safeties in all of football. I feel like every single year at launch, he always gets underrated. This year is no exception, man. He has 74 tackles, 3 interceptions last year, same amount of interceptions as Darian Stewart, and more tackles, and just about the same amount of tackles as Mike Mitchell, while having 2 more interceptions, so another huge elite snub in my opinion. Last but not least, we're looking at Darren Sproles. Now you might say, okay, CK, come on now you're reaching, now you're really biased. Sproles is clearly over the hill. I know you have a soft spot in your heart for him. Okay, maybe that's kind of true, but tell me why he had more rushing yards than Giovanni Bernard, more receiving yards than Giovanni Bernard, more receptions, and also more touchdowns, but somehow Bernard gets an elite, but not Sprosey. And that's gonna wrap up my snubs list. Let me know if you agree with it down in the comment section. Is there anyone I forgot? Please do me a favor and drop a like on this video, man. Can we hit 250 likes? That'll be amazing. Please subscribe if you're new around here. And that's for me.
Gotta run when I hear the bird call. Damn, hop in that thing and murk off, swerve off.